My name is Lucille. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how the man I was supposed to marry vanished without warning, left me standing in the ruins of our future, and how I learned to build something far stronger from the ashes. It started like something out of a dream. Brendan wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who drew attention the moment he walked in, but that's exactly what drew me to him. We met at a professional seminar on sustainability engineering 3 years ago in Austin. He was 2 years older than me, dressed in an ordinary gray button-down, sipping bad coffee with quiet focus while everyone else networked like sharks. I didn't even mean to sit next to him. The chair was just the only one available. But within 10 minutes, he was asking questions that weren't small talk. Real questions about my work, my ambitions, my thoughts on urban design. And when I laughed at one of his dry jokes, his eyes lit up like he'd just won something. Brendan made the world quieter. That's what I used to tell people. In a room full of noise, he could make it feel like it was just us. He proposed at the end of fall, just before Thanksgiving, along the lake trail in Austin where we used to walk every Sunday morning. He didn't have a fancy ring. Didn't plan some viral-worthy proposal. He just knelt on one knee, with the wind brushing his hair and said, "Lucille, will you grow old with me?" I said yes through tears. Real tears, the kind that come from knowing your life might finally begin to make sense. We set a wedding date for spring. I dove into planning like a woman possessed. The venue was a ranch just outside the city, quiet and rustic, surrounded by wildflowers and the smell of cedar. We argued about colors and flavors and tablecloths, but even those fights felt like love in disguise. He'd squeeze my hand after each disagreement, as if to say, "See? We're already good at being married." So when Brendan said he needed to fly back to California for a few weeks to check on his mother after a minor surgery, I didn't blink. He was close to her. Hadn't seen her in almost a year. I packed his suitcase with snacks, 2 bags of his favorite local coffee beans, and a handwritten note tucked between his shirts. It said, "Come home soon. Your future wife is counting the days." He kissed my forehead and said, "I'll call every night. Don't overthink. Just a few weeks." But a few weeks turned out to be the cliff edge of everything I thought was stable. The first few nights, he did call. Quick chats. Said his mom was recovering well. He sounded a little tired, but still warm. Still like Brendan. We even laughed about one of the wedding planners recommending peacock feathers for centerpieces. Then, on the 5th night, my call rang once and cut off. I stared at my phone, blinking. Then tried again. Nothing. At first, I assumed he was busy or forgot to charge his phone. I sent a message, "Hope everything's okay. Call me when you get a second." It stayed delivered. Not read. Not answered. The next day came and went. Then another. Finally, a message. "Lucille, I need some time to think. I'll explain later." I reread it a dozen times. Thought it was some kind of joke or mistake. Brendan wasn't cryptic. He didn't take time to think. He talked things through. Always. That's who he was, or so I thought. I messaged him back immediately. "Think about what? The wedding? Us? I'm scared, Brendan. Please talk to me." No reply. Just silence. For 2 days, I tried not to fall apart. I cleaned obsessively. Played music. Baked muffins I didn't eat. I told myself, maybe his mom's sicker than he said. Maybe something happened and he doesn't want to worry me. But the longer he stayed silent, the more a sick realization began to take root. He wasn't unable to reply. He just wasn't. By the 6th day, I called his sister, Emily. She was quiet on the phone, unusually distant. When I asked if Brendan was staying with their mother, there was a pause. Then she said, "I'm not really sure. We haven't talked much lately." I asked her again. More directly. Emily, is he staying with your mom or not? All she said was, maybe he just needs space. That's when I knew. Knew deep in my gut that something was unraveling, and I was being left in the dark on purpose. 10 days of silence passed. 10 days of going to bed with my phone under my pillow, praying for a ding, a buzz, anything. Then, one morning, I looked up flights. Booked a one-way ticket to Monterey, California, where Brendan said his mother lived. I remembered the photos on his phone, the beach, the white lighthouse, the lavender fields. I remembered enough to find him. I told no one I was going. Packed light. Took a red-eye. Rented a car at the airport and drove straight to the address he'd once written down when we filled out our premarital forms. When I reached the house, it looked exactly like I remembered, white stucco, slanted roof, a tiny porch with a rusted wind chime. I walked up and knocked. The door opened. And there he was. Brendan. Wearing a gray t-shirt, sleep still in his eyes, frozen like he was staring at a ghost. Lucille? I swallowed the lump in my throat. You said you'd explain later. This is later. He stood there, unmoving, as if time itself had paused between us. The last time I'd seen Brendan, he kissed me goodbye like a man certain of his future. Now, he looked like someone caught in a lie he hadn't prepared to explain. His voice cracked first. You shouldn't have come all this way. I tilted my head. And yet I did. Because when someone you're about to marry vanishes mid-conversation, you either grieve or go get answers. I chose the second. Brendan stepped aside, reluctantly. Come in. The house was small, cozy, smelling faintly of cinnamon and something floral, lavender, probably. I noticed a teacup on the table. One cup. No sign of his mother. I sat on the edge of the couch, knees together, hands clasped. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Brendan walked past me, rubbing the back of his neck, his steps hesitant like a boy who just broke a window and knew he'd have to confess. I didn't plan for it to be like this, he said quietly. Like what? I asked. Like leaving me in the middle of wedding planning with nothing but a single message? Like making me wonder if you were dead? Like finding out from your sister that you weren't even staying with your mom? He winced. I did go to see my mom. For a few days. But that's not where I've been staying. I already knew the answer. I just wanted him to say it. I ran into Zoe, he finally said. His voice was so soft, it barely reached me. Zoe. His ex. The one he claimed was ancient history. The one he said had moved on. The one he swore he hadn't spoken to in years. My heart didn't sink. It didn't shatter. It turned to stone. Cold. Heavy. Did you go looking for her? I asked, not blinking. No, he said quickly. It was a coincidence. At the bookstore downtown. I was just. I don't know. Browsing. And there she was. And what? I replied. She gave you a look and suddenly 3 years of us disappeared? Brendan dropped into a chair across from me, his hands in his lap. It wasn't like that. We talked. She asked about my life. I told her I was engaged. She said she was happy for me. But then we met again. And again. It just kept happening. That's not coincidence. That's a decision, I said coldly. I didn't cheat, he said quickly. We didn't do anything. I needed to think. I stood up. You needed to think about whether or not to marry me after one chance run-in with your ex? And the way you chose to think was to disappear? Ghost me like a teenager? He didn't answer. That silence, again, felt like the deepest betrayal. You once told me you hated ambiguity, I said. That if anything ever felt off between us, you'd bring it up like an adult. But instead, you vanished. Why? He looked up at me then, his face tired, not guilty, just overwhelmed. Because I wasn't sure. About myself. About the wedding. About whether I was marrying you because I wanted it, or because it was the next logical step. I stared at him, jaw tight. So I was the logical step. His mouth opened, but no words came. I picked up my purse. I'm not here to beg. I just needed to see your face when you admitted it. Lucille. No, I cut in. You've had enough time to decide if I'm what you want. And I've just decided, finally, that I'm done waiting for someone who can't even send a goodbye. He stood up quickly. Can we at least talk about it? I stepped backward toward the door. We just did. I walked out without slamming the door, without screaming, without letting him see a single tear. I got into my rental car and drove away from the little white house in Monterey that had once seemed like a comforting anecdote from a man's past. Now, it was a graveyard for the future I had imagined. The drive back to Austin felt longer. Not physically, but emotionally. Every song on the radio sounded hollow. Every billboard reminded me of wedding vendors. Every gas station clerk's smile made me want to burst into tears. But I didn't cry. Not until I got home. That night, I sat in the kitchen, turned off all the lights, and just sat in silence. Not the kind Brendan gave me. My own silence. A deliberate, necessary stillness. It took 3 days before he texted again. I hope you're okay. I'd like to talk when you're ready. That was it. No apology. No remorse. Just a weak, bland breadcrumb meant to ease his own guilt. I didn't reply. I didn't block him yet. But I made myself a promise, I would no longer be someone's fallback. I told Rachel first, my best friend since college. Her face tightened with rage when I finished the story. You always loved him more than he deserved, she said, pulling me into a hug. And maybe she was right. Maybe I had romanticized Brendan because he wasn't like the others. Because he was quiet. Because he didn't shout. Because he remembered birthdays and brought soup when I was sick. But now I saw that quiet didn't always mean kind. Sometimes, quiet was just cowardice dressed in calm. I started reclaiming myself in pieces. Cut my hair shorter. Deleted the wedding folder from my drive. Cancelled the floral arrangements and called the venue to release our date. The woman on the phone asked if we wanted to reschedule. I said, no. There is no we. 3 nights later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Brendan standing there with a paper bag of coffee beans from my favorite shop. I thought you might want something sweet, he said. And in that moment, something inside me snapped, but not in pain. In power. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at Brendan like he was a stranger who'd shown up at the wrong address. Because that's what he was now. A man who'd walked away from me in silence and now had the audacity to come back with a bag of coffee like that could fix the hollow pit he'd left behind. He smiled, unsure. You look good. I've been thinking about you. About us. Maybe we could talk? Talk. That word had lost all meaning coming from him. I already heard everything I needed to hear, I said flatly. Brendan held the bag out like a peace offering. Lucille, I messed up. I panicked. Seeing Zoe again stirred up a lot of stuff I didn't realize was still there. But after I saw you at the house, I realized it's not her I want. It's you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. You don't get to pick me like a safer option, Brendan. I'm not a fallback plan. I'm not the woman you come back to when your nostalgia trip doesn't work out. His mouth opened and closed. His hand gripped the coffee bag tighter, and I could see his ego deflating. Come on, Lucille, he said softly. We already planned everything. The venue, the date, the flowers. We can still make it work. I stepped forward, my voice low but sharp. You didn't just change your mind. You left me in silence. You watched me spiral. You knew what you were doing. And now you want to roll back in here like nothing happened? He hesitated. It wasn't that simple. Yes, it was, I cut in. You made a choice. You chose distance. You chose doubt. You chose Zoe. I don't care if you didn't sleep with her. You gave her space that belonged to me. He finally lowered his gaze. I just needed to be sure. And now it's my turn to be sure, I said. Sure that I don't want a man who runs when things get real. I looked at his hand. The ring was still on his finger. Take it off, I said. What? The ring. Take it off. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. But after a beat, he slid it off and placed it on the small table beside my front door. I picked it up, held it between my fingers. It felt cold. Empty. Like everything he'd promised inside that proposal had vanished. You never asked if I still needed you, I said, placing it back on the table. And the truth is, I don't. Brendan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. For the first time, he looked truly speechless. And that silence, that empty, stunned silence, was the only thing we had left in common. I can fix this, he whispered. No, you can't. Some things don't need fixing, they need burying. I opened the door wide. Goodbye, Brendan. He hesitated for one last moment, then walked out. When the door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I picked up the coffee he brought, opened the lid, and without a word, poured it down the sink. The ground swirled around like debris from a shipwreck. Then I tossed the cup in the trash and wiped the counter clean. 3 days later, I was breathing again. Not fully, but enough to function. Then Mia messaged me. Mia, one of Brendan's former coworkers, someone I'd hung out with multiple times in group settings. She was the kind of person who asked about your cat's name and remembered it a year later. Always polite, never nosy. Her message was simple. Hey, I heard what happened. I don't know the whole story, but if you ever want to talk, I'm free this afternoon. I paused for a long time before answering. I wasn't ready to date. I wasn't even ready to talk, if I'm being honest. But I was ready to sit across from someone who didn't lie to me. Someone who didn't disappear when life got inconvenient. So I replied. Sure. Coffee sounds good. We met at a little place downtown, neutral territory. I wore jeans and a plain white shirt, no makeup, no effort to impress. I was showing up as me. Mia smiled when she saw me. I'm glad you came. And just like that, we talked. Not about Brendan, at least, not at first. She told me about work, her boss's weird obsession with goat cheese, the new gym she was trying. We laughed. Awkwardly at first. Then genuinely. There was nothing romantic about it. Nothing flirtatious. Just warmth. Understanding. Presence. But somehow, Brendan found out within 24 hours. It was Sunday evening when it happened. I was folding laundry when there was a loud, aggressive knock at my front door. I opened it, and Brendan barged in without waiting for an invite. Seriously, Lucille? You went out with Mia? He said it like I'd cheated on him. Like we hadn't broken off an engagement that he ran from in the first place. She texted to check in, I replied calmly. We talked. That's it. Brendan's voice rose. You know she used to have feelings for me. You did it on purpose. I blinked. If I did it on purpose, she wouldn't have gone home alone. That shut him up. He paced like a man losing his grip on control. You don't see how that's wrong, he asked. No, I said, crossing my arms. But you know what is wrong? You thinking you still have a say in what I do. You vanished, Brendan. You made your choice. He stepped closer, his tone sharper. You'll regret this. Trust me. You have no idea what you're walking into. I narrowed my eyes. No, Brendan. I had no idea who you were. But now I do. I pointed at the door. Get out. He stared at me for a beat, angry, panicked, unsure. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him like I had betrayed him. But I didn't flinch. That night, I finally blocked his number. Not because I was angry, but because I was free. I woke up the next morning feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: stillness. Not silence. Not emptiness. Just a clean, quiet calm, like the emotional storm had finally passed, leaving behind a version of myself I could finally recognize again. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone the moment I opened my eyes. There were no unread messages. No missed calls. No second guessing. I went for a walk around the lake. The one where Brendan had proposed just a few months earlier. The trees still whispered in the breeze the same way they had that day, but I didn't feel broken walking past them. I felt separate. As if the version of me who cried from joy that day was someone else entirely. A stranger I still respected but no longer needed to be. I was no longer the bride-to-be. No longer planning a life for two. I was Lucille again. That afternoon, I opened the storage bin that held all the wedding materials, samples, swatches, guest lists. I took everything out piece by piece and placed them in a cardboard box labeled "Not Me Anymore." And then I drove to the nearest donation center and dropped it off. All of it. Gone. But Brendan wasn't finished. He wasn't ready to let go the way I had. It started subtly. I noticed a black pickup truck, same model he used to drive, parked across from my building a few days later. I ignored it at first, thinking I was just being paranoid. After all, it's Austin. Everyone has a pickup. But then I saw him. Standing 2 blocks away from my gym, hoodie up, pretending to scroll through his phone. He looked up for a second. Saw me. And quickly turned away. I didn't say anything to anyone. Not yet. I needed to be sure I wasn't overreacting, that this wasn't just a coincidence. But by the 4th time I saw him, outside my grocery store parking lot, I knew. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. This was a man who didn't know how to accept rejection. That night, I sent him one message. Brendan, I know you're following me. This is your first and only warning. Do not cross the line again. He didn't reply. But the next day, the truck was gone. No sightings. No lingering shadows outside my windows. And just like that, I had my space back. I didn't tell Rachel about it until a week later. We were sitting in her living room with glasses of red wine and a takeout spread between us. I told her everything, about the sightings, the message, and how quickly he vanished afterward. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, Lucille, what scares me is that he didn't fight back. What do you mean? I mean, someone who gets caught doing something wrong usually either denies it or tries to explain it away. But Brendan? He just disappeared the second you called him out. That's not guilt. That's a man who knows exactly what he's doing, and knew he could get caught. The room went quiet. Her words settled into me like sand in the corners of my mind. That's when it finally hit me, Brendan hadn't changed. He had always been this person. Calm on the outside. Calculated underneath. I had just never looked closely enough before. That's what hurt the most, not the betrayal, not the disappearing act, not even the confrontation. What hurt the most was realizing I had spent 3 years building a life with someone I never truly knew. But that pain didn't last. Not like it used to. Instead of falling apart, I started putting myself back together. I signed up for an art class at a studio near South Congress. I repainted my apartment, olive green in the living room, pale lilac in the bedroom. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to since I got engaged. I even started volunteering at a local shelter on weekends, helping young women find career paths after leaving abusive relationships. Every time someone asked why the wedding didn't happen, I didn't flinch. I just said, I chose myself. And every time I said it, the words got easier. He didn't break me. He revealed me. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I was the woman who'd learned how to walk away, quietly, completely, and without apology. A few weeks later, Mia texted again. This time, she invited me to a local gallery opening. Nothing intense. Just art, music, and good conversation. I declined politely. Not because I was scared, but because I was focused on people and places that didn't feel like old chapters. She understood. That's what I appreciated most about Mia, she didn't push. Instead, I walked to that same coffee shop Brendan once brought beans from and ordered my favorite drink alone. I sat by the window and read a book I hadn't touched since college. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled for no reason. A few days after that, I received an email from the wedding photographer we'd booked. Subject line, final confirmation for the Tate wedding, May 4th. I stared at the screen. Tate. Brendan's last name. My would-have-been wedding day. I clicked open the email. It included photo samples, location notes, and a cheerful sign-off reminding us they were looking forward to capturing our big day. I didn't cry. I simply hit reply and wrote. The wedding is cancelled. Please release the date. Thank you. And that was it. It was done. There was no ceremony. No vows. No heartbreak on the altar. Just one woman, standing tall, knowing she'd saved herself from marrying the wrong man. I thought Brendan had finally faded into the past. I thought I'd sealed that chapter, padlocked it, and buried the key deep in the confidence I'd finally rebuilt. But endings, true endings, have a way of testing your strength one last time. It was 2 weeks before what would have been our wedding day. I was helping Rachel finalize catering for her own engagement party when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Lucille, I know you blocked me. But I need to talk to you. Just once. Please. It didn't say who it was. But I knew. That calculated politeness. That tight, composed plea. Brendan. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I did what I should have done a long time ago, I didn't respond. I deleted the message, blocked the new number, and went right back to helping Rachel pick table linens. Because you don't open a door after you've finally found peace behind it. But Brendan wasn't finished knocking. That weekend, I went to the art studio for a Saturday morning workshop. I'd been working on a charcoal piece, nothing dramatic, just skyline outlines and shadow play. I liked the simplicity of black and white. No hidden colors. No secrets. When I stepped out for air, I saw him. Brendan. Leaning against the back of his black pickup, parked near the studio gate like he'd been waiting. My heart didn't race. Not this time. I walked toward him slowly, evenly, like I was facing a neighbor I hadn't seen in years, not the man who left my life in ruins. He straightened up when he saw me. Lucille. You've got 2 minutes, I said flatly. Then I call the cops. He blinked, clearly taken aback. I just wanted to say goodbye. For real. I've been doing therapy. I've been thinking a lot about how I handled things, and I know I hurt you. I crossed my arms. You hurt me, yes. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I recovered. His lips parted slightly, as if those words were physically painful to hear. I never wanted to lose you. I nodded once. But you didn't lose me, Brendan. You gave me up. You threw me away to chase a version of yourself you thought you could find in the past. He stepped closer. Zoe's not in the picture anymore. That's good, I said. She never should have been in it while I was. He sighed, tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. I'm here to remind you, I'm no longer yours to reach for. He looked stunned. We were supposed to build a life together. And I'm still building a life, I replied. But it doesn't include a man who disappears the moment his feelings get complicated. He swallowed hard. Can I at least write you a letter? No, I said. You've already said everything you had to say, by the way you acted. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't cry. Didn't look back. Didn't wonder what could have been. Because I already knew. And what could have been would have destroyed me. The next day, Rachel threw her engagement party, and I went with a genuine smile. I wore a deep emerald dress, not wedding white, not mourning black. Just bold, radiant green. I danced. I laughed. And when someone asked if I was dating anyone, I smiled and said, not yet, but I'm dating myself for now. She's amazing. People clapped. And I meant every word. Brendan never showed up again. Whether it was shame, closure, or fear, I didn't care. I never saw his truck again. Never got another message. But his absence became the strongest form of presence I'd ever felt. A reminder that losing someone isn't always a loss. Sometimes, it's salvation. Later that summer, something happened that made everything come full circle. A podcast producer reached out after seeing an essay I'd anonymously submitted to a women's magazine about broken engagements. She wanted to feature me in a series called What I Left Behind. I hesitated at first. But then I said yes. We recorded the episode at a small studio in East Austin. I sat down in front of the mic, took a deep breath, and told my story. The betrayal. The silence. The confrontation. The rebuilding. I didn't use Brendan's name. I didn't need to. The point wasn't vengeance. It was freedom. The episode went viral in 3 days. Thousands of women messaged the show, thanking me. Some said they'd been ghosted days before their weddings. Some had discovered affairs after years of marriage. Some had simply watched themselves disappear inside someone else's timeline. But all of them said the same thing. Thank you for showing us how to take our power back. I cried that night. Not out of sadness. But because I realized it had all been worth it. The silence. The heartbreak. The coffee cup in the trash. Because without all of it, I never would have become the woman holding a microphone, helping thousands of others find their voices again. The week the podcast went viral, I received an email I didn't expect. It was from Brendan's older cousin, Noah. We'd only met once at a holiday gathering, a tall man with a dry sense of humor and the kind of weary eyes you get from watching too many people pretend they're fine. Subject line, I heard your voice. I opened it, half expecting a threat or backhanded apology. Instead, it read, Lucille, I don't mean to intrude, but I recognized your story on the podcast. You don't owe me anything, but I wanted to say thank you. You were braver than you'll ever know. And if it means anything, Brendan didn't just do this to you. He's been like this his whole life. You just happened to be the first woman strong enough to walk away before it broke you completely. I sat with that message for hours. It felt like someone had handed me a puzzle piece to a picture I never understood. All those small, quiet red flags, the subtle dodging, the way Brendan needed to think every time life got real, the charming restraint that looked like calm but masked cowardice. I had spent so long wondering if I'd missed something. Now I knew. I hadn't missed a thing. I had seen it. I just didn't name it. And naming it now felt like reclaiming every ounce of control I'd ever handed over. In the weeks that followed, my life shifted again. The podcast appearance led to more invitations, small speaking panels about self-worth, healing after betrayal, and learning how to break free from someone else's silence. People started referring to me as the woman who walked away from the altar and found herself. I didn't correct them. Even though there was no altar. No bouquet. No ceremony. Because emotionally, it was a wedding day. It was the end of something sacred and the beginning of something more honest. I also began mentoring young women through the same shelter I'd volunteered at before. One afternoon, a girl named Sienna, barely 20, pulled me aside after a workshop. She said, "You're the reason I didn't go back." I blinked. Go back to who? She looked at the floor. My ex. He used to gaslight me, vanish, show up again with roses and a list of excuses. But when I heard your story, I realized, love doesn't disappear. Love doesn't hide. That moment changed something in me. It wasn't about Brendan anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This story, my story, was never just about a broken engagement. It was about women who were taught to wait for men to figure it out. Who were told that patience was the price of love. Who were taught to be the understanding one, the forgiving one, the accommodating one. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was the woman who left. And I was proud of her. Still, life has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. It was a Sunday morning in late August when I ran into Zoe. Yes, that Zoe. The woman whose name had haunted my bedroom ceiling for nights, echoing in unanswered texts and silences that cut deeper than screams. I was in the checkout line at a grocery store when I heard someone say, "Lucille?" I turned. And there she was. She looked exactly like I remembered from Brendan's old photos, brown hair in a low bun, delicate features, expensive leather bag slung over her shoulder like it weighed nothing. I froze. She didn't. She walked up, calm, and said, "I'm sorry if this is weird. I recognized you." I didn't respond right away. What could I possibly say? "I'm not here to fight," she added quickly. "I just want to say. I didn't know." I raised an eyebrow. Didn't know what? That he was engaged when we started talking again. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It was printed, like something from another decade. A photo of her and Brendan at the used bookstore, him holding a paperback, smiling. She tapped the back. Scrawled in ink were the words, February 2nd. Our third visit. I remembered that date. It was exactly 5 days before he sent me that message. "I need some time to think." Zoe looked up at me with eyes filled with quiet shame. I found out the truth weeks later. I cut it off. But by then, he'd already ghosted you, hadn't he? I nodded once. She sighed. You're not the only one he lied to. But you're the only one who walked away with dignity. There was nothing more to say after that. She placed the photo on top of my cart and whispered, "You deserved better," before walking away. I left the store in a daze. Not hurt. Not broken. Just confirmed. Confirmed that I was never the problem. Confirmed that Brendan's betrayal had never been about love, but about ego, about control, about needing to be someone's son even while playing with someone else's shadow. Later that night, I lit a candle and burned the photo she gave me. Not out of rage. But as a ritual. A release. Then I picked up my sketchbook and began drawing something new. Not the skyline this time. But a woman. Standing in a field of lavender. Back turned. Walking away. Not broken. Just whole. I finished that sketch the same way I ended my engagement, quietly, without ceremony, but with a resolve no one could shake. The woman in the field of lavender wasn't running. She wasn't glancing back with sorrow or regret. She was simply moving forward, step by steady step, into a horizon that belonged entirely to her. And for the first time since Brendan disappeared, I finally felt at peace. But closure, real closure, doesn't just come from burning photos or blocking numbers. It comes from reclaiming the life you almost handed over to someone who didn't earn it. So that's exactly what I did. I turned the podcast attention into a movement, a small but growing online community of women called Second Vow. Not a dating group. Not a trauma circle. A community for those who had once said yes to the wrong person and decided to say yes to themselves instead. We met monthly on video calls. Shared our stories. Some were divorced. Some had run away from fiancés, others from boyfriends who slowly drained them year after year. We laughed. We cried. We healed. Together. And one day, something unexpected happened. A woman named Adriana from Denver messaged me privately. She said she'd just left her fiancé 2 weeks before their wedding after catching him messaging an ex. She said she'd heard my story on a podcast and had replayed the part where I said, "You never asked if I still needed you." She told me that was the line that changed her life. "You gave me permission to stop waiting," she wrote. And I needed someone to say it before I could say it myself. I sat with her message for a long time. Then I replied, "You didn't need permission. You just needed a reminder that you're allowed to choose peace over proof." That became the unofficial motto of Second Vow. And mine, too. In early fall, just before what would have been our honeymoon trip, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Lucille. I've been following what you've built. It's beautiful. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize what I destroyed. But I'm glad the world gets to know you now the way I never truly did. B." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I folded the note and dropped it into the shredder. It wasn't anger. It was acknowledgement. Like a closed book falling into the back of a shelf. Finished. Filed away. No longer part of my story's future. That evening, I went to the lake. Not to mourn, but to celebrate. The same lake where he once asked me to grow old with him. Now it was where I asked myself the same thing. Would I grow old with me? And without hesitation, I smiled and whispered, yes. Because I knew now that real love doesn't make you beg for clarity. It doesn't test your value with silence. It doesn't return only when the past fails. Real love stays. And when it doesn't, you leave. Not because you're broken. But because you're finally whole. This is the part of the story no one talks about. The after. The rebuild. The quiet mornings when you make coffee for one and don't feel lonely. The Sunday walks without rings, without wedding plans, without pain. Just you, alive in your own skin, breathing without guilt, standing without apology. Brendan thought I'd wait. He thought I'd bend when he finally turned back around. But all he found was a woman who no longer needed to be chosen, because she had chosen herself. So if you're reading this, or listening, and you've ever been someone's backup plan, know this. You are not a rehearsal. You are not a maybe. You are not someone's lesson, they are yours. Like I said the day I closed the door on the man who once called me forever. You had your chance. You chose to run. And now I choose to rise. This isn't just the end of my story. It's the beginning of a life I built without compromise. And that's a love worth saying yes to. Lucille's story is a reminder to all of us, sometimes, the person we need to commit to the most is ourselves. If someone ever makes you feel like an option, walk. If they need time to think, give them all the time in the world, alone. Because the right person won't hesitate when it comes to loving you. They'll show up. They'll stay. And they'll never let silence answer where truth belongs. Have you ever walked away from someone who couldn't see your worth? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.